guys have likely heard the term bigger picture. It means that there's something bigger going on more than just one small detail. There's probably a lot going on behind the scenes, things happening that you're not aware of. That's what a bigger picture means. We see it a whole lot with social media. Take a look at this post. In the middle of this COVID-19 shutdown, wouldn't you love to be on a plane going somewhere? Look how lucky she is. But you zoom out for the bigger picture, I'm not putting my face anywhere near that. See, we all have a tendency to focus on one small detail rather than what's really going on big picture. We tend to focus in on one small event, one little detail, one circumstance, and we let that one little thing be what we really focus all of our attention on. And when we do that, we tend to miss the bigger picture. We're all guilty of this, especially when it comes to our families. Really, if you think about where you put yourself in your head, in your family, you're most likely to think that you're the main character. I know I'm guilty of it just as much as anybody. And intentionally or not, we often think that the world revolves around us. That the things that we've got going on, the experiences that we're having, the stories that are being told about us, those are the stories that to us matter the most. Likely in your family, you feel like your needs, the things that you want, the things that your schedule, the foods that you want, those are the things that matter most, more so than anybody else in your family. And right now, especially in the midst of all this COVID-19 shutdown shenanigans, it's even probably more apparent to you the attention that goes on in your family. As you guys have been stuck together with nowhere else to go, where you're all up in each other's business, I bet if you're anything like me, that you wish the attention would go on to something else. That your parents wouldn't pay so much attention to the things that you're doing with your free time, that your work packets, the stuff that you're having to do on your laptops with school, whatever that looks like for you right now, everybody seems to be in one another's business. The meals that we're having, you're eating them with your family. The work that your parents are doing, the schoolwork that you're having to do, you're all having to do it all in this one small little bubble. All your free time spent with your family. See, really the big problems in families arise when in the midst of all that chaos and all that attention being thrown around everywhere, the big problem comes when we feel like we're the main character in the story. And when we feel like we're the main character in our stories, we tend to miss the big picture. And when we miss out on the big picture, especially when it comes to our families, it can cause a lot of frustration and hurt. But the thing is that family dynamics, those struggles, those issues, they're not new to the COVID-19 epidemic. These things have been going on for centuries. So that's why in the middle of this series, we're talking about somebody who was really familiar with difficult family dynamics. We're talking about the story, you may remember it from Miss Katie's Sunday School a while ago. You may have heard stories about this guy called Joseph. Joseph was a part of this massive family. He had 10 other older brothers. He's the youngest of the 10. And we see in Joseph's story and his family story that family dynamics are tricky now, but they're also tricky back then as well. And so here is how our story is going to begin. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. It was clear to everybody that Joseph was his dad Jacob's absolute favorite. He bought him that nice new coat. He let all of his sons know who the favorite was. Everybody knew that Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. And now you might be the favorite in your family, you might not, but likely you've had some kind of experience like this, that one of your siblings, if you have siblings, gets something nice and you get nothing. They get to go out with their friends and you got to stay home. They get all the nice things while you're left with nothing. This is the experience that Joseph's brothers had, And so it's not difficult to imagine why they didn't like him very much. In fact, the story probably gets a little worse. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. "Listen to this dream," he said. "We were out in the field, tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine." The dream that Joseph has, whether you think it was wise or not, he shares that with his brothers. This dream that he has that talks about his brothers coming to him and bowing down, he lets them know that that's going to happen. Because dreams in this culture were even more important than they are now. Most of the time you have a dream and you're just like, that was weird. But back then, when you had a dream, especially in Old Testament stories, that dream typically becomes some sort of prophecy, some kind of telling of this is what's going to happen. So you can imagine that things are going to get even worse with Joseph and his brothers. We see in this story with Joseph, his brothers, and his family that when we can't see the big picture, we need to remember the impact that it has on our families. No one in this story seems to be aware of the effect that their actions are having on one another. Jacob, the dad, buying one of his sons a coat, letting everybody know that this kid right here, Joseph, he's my favorite. He doesn't seem to even realize the effect that it has on the other brothers. He's not aware of the anger that it stirs up in them. He's not even aware that all that love and gifts he's lavishing on his youngest son is going to kind of make him into a turd. In Joseph's case, we don't see any kind of recognition on his part that him telling the dreams, everybody knowing that he's the favorite, he doesn't really even seem to realize the anger that's surrounding him. He doesn't understand, like when he tells his brothers the dream. You would think that if things are already tense, Joseph would have been wise to just kind of shut up about the dream. But that's not what he does. He goes and blabs it because he's not aware of what his actions, he's not aware of the effect they're having on his brothers. And his brothers don't seem to be very aware either, that this anger that they're harboring towards their brother, they have no idea what's fixing to happen. They have no idea the pain and the suffering that's going to get caused because of their anger and them allowing it to get built up. Everybody in this story seems to be missing the big picture. And it's because when we only think of ourselves, we miss out on the big picture. And when we miss out on the big picture, big problems can arise. It's easy to think of a time in your life where somebody has acted out of their own self-interest, where they've put themselves first, where they've chosen to do what they think is right for them. And when they did that, it hurt us in a negative way. It's easy to come up with one of those stories of maybe your parents doing something that they thought was best for them that negatively affected you. Or one of your friends choosing to hang out with somebody else because that was what was best for them at the time and it hurt you. We can easily come up with stories where somebody else has missed out on the big picture that included you and you got hurt because of it. But if you really think about it, you're probably just as guilty as well. These big picture moments that we get so focused on the things that have to do with us, the small little details about our lives, that everybody else gets hurt because we miss out on the big picture. There's always more to the story than we're actually aware of. Jacob, the dad, Joseph, the youngest son, the brothers, none of them were aware that anything else was going on. They weren't aware of the big picture, the whole story that was going on, and it caused a lot of issues. When you can't see the big picture, remember the impact you have on your family. So what does that look like? What does it look like to remember the big picture and the effect that our actions have on our family? Well, one, it's pretty easy. We need to be aware of those choices that we're making. Questions we need to ask ourselves when it comes to the way that we interact with our family and see that big picture. We've got to be aware that there is a big picture. So questions we need to ask are things like, how are the choices that I'm making, the decisions I'm making, how am I acting? How is that affecting my family? Another good question to ask would, how do I put my family first? How do I show my brothers, my sister, my parents, my grandparents, how do I show them love? These are hard questions, and typically with hard questions come difficult answers. But they're honest questions that we need to ask ourselves if we're going to begin to take a snapshot view of what that big picture looks like. The other thing we've got to do, and this is probably even harder, is take a step. Make one small choice this week to change something, to help you to see that big picture. Change just one behavior. Change one habit that you've got that is really irking everybody. Because again, in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic, you're stuck with your family and everybody's probably on edge right now. Do something as simple as pick up your room. If you've left something on a table, just pick it up. You left trash around. If your parents are always on you about picking stuff up, pick it up. It's super easy. It wouldn't take that much effort, but just pick something up. In those moments where you are really easily given over to your temper, where you get mad really angrily, especially if there's something that a sibling does that really gets under your skin, that all they've got to do is this one little thing and boom, you're set off. Maybe take some time to go to your room to separate yourself so you don't flare up into some angry outburst. Something small. Practice some kind of self-awareness that these are the things that set me off. These are the things that my parents or my siblings have been on me about. Be aware of those things, and this week, just change one of them. I'm not asking you to give everything up, but pick one thing that you know is kind of irking people in your house or causing some drama and change it. When you can't see the bigger picture, remember the impact you have on your family. As we meet this week over Zoom, the one question I want you guys to be thinking about is this. What's one way I might be causing conflict or tension in my family? Think about this question this week, and as we show up together on Zoom, we'll talk about what it looks like to begin to shift from that tension and that drama to see the bigger picture. And we'll see you guys on Zoom.